What if, by trying to avoid rocking the boat, you actually make it sink? If you're like most nice guys and people pleasers, you've probably been walking on eggshells in your relationship to avoid upsetting your partner and to prevent conflict. You choose your words carefully, you avoid certain topics, you anticipate and prevent problems from happening, you pretend to agree with things, you follow rather than lead. You're generally just trying to keep the peace all the time, and you probably pat yourself on the back for doing it. But I'll bet you've noticed something that's pretty frustrating. Not only is this not working, the conflicts are getting worse as time passes. So either the drama keeps happening anyway, it's just a different type of drama, or other problems are starting to emerge even if it looks like the two of you are reasonably conflict free. So things look okay on the surface, but things like intimacy, respect, knowing who you are, all of this stuff is starting to deteriorate or has gotten really bad. Over time, you'll start to feel resentful, highly anxious, feel like you're kind of being eroded away, a sense of dread that things are never going to get better, that you're trapped in a sort of prison here, and that there's really no way out. So there's this kind of paradox or this trap where you feel like you're doing everything right and being a good person, and yet there's constant tension. It feels like the problem never gets solved. In today's episode, we're going to break down why walking on eggshells not only does not work, it's actually one of the main causes of conflict and tension in a relationship. We're going to break down what it means to walk on eggshells, what it looks like, why it happens, how you became a person who does this, why it doesn't work, why it backfires on you, and a healthier, more respectful, and confident way to deal with these issues that will actually reduce the overall conflict over time. The best thing is you can reduce all this conflict without actually causing a lot of chaos. It's not going to be as bad as you think it's going to be. But you're just going to have to trust me on this one. Because let's face it, even if avoiding conflict is keeping the peace, it's creating other problems. If you're new here and you don't already know me, my name's Dan Munro. I've been coaching nice guys and people pleasers since 2013. And pretty much all of the ones that I've coached who have been in romantic relationships have had the issue of walking on eggshells. This is very common. By the time they come to me, they feel very stuck, they feel resentful, they feel trapped by the situation as if it can't be fixed, and the relationship is slowly deteriorating, even though they're trying their best. These guys have noble intentions, or at least they believe they do. They think they're being mature, calm, helpful, supportive. They feel like they're being a really good partner. So it makes no sense to them. It feels very unfair that this isn't working. And they're exhausted by the whole process. They're hypervigilant. They have to keep monitoring their partner's mood all the time. They're constantly having to edit themselves, change who they are, adjusting to the context at all times. And they have to keep avoiding the truth, and they're very restricted on how honest they can be because there's just so much that isn't allowed to be said because of the emotions it tends to trigger off. Pretty much every time, the very strategy of trying to keep the peace and not rock the boat is the thing causing the most tension and the most conflict, though most often these guys can't see the connection between the two. So today I'm going to try and teach you what I've taught them. So I'm going to be starting with a true story on this issue, kind of paint a picture of what it looks like in real life. Then we're going to dive into what walking on eggshells means, why it happens, why it causes more problems than it solves. And then we're going to look at how to try and handle conflict in a different, more effective, healthier way that not only improves your relationship, but makes you respect yourself and feel more confident as a man. So let's start by talking about a guy we'll call Johnny, just for anonymity, however you say that word. Johnny was somebody I worked with a couple of years back, and he had a partner who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So she was quite reactionary. Whether or not that's related to the disorder is unknown, but it was very easy to upset her. She was easily offended. She often took things personally, even when they weren't about her. Her mood swings were fairly wild. There was no mood that was guaranteed to last. They were quite unpredictable. What upset her today might not upset her tomorrow. What she was fine with today might be a disaster tomorrow. There was no kind of rules to follow in her presence that really suited her mood and kept her in a calm, constant state. This is how he describes her. Now, he was also somebody, old Johnny boy, we'll call him. He was also somebody who really struggled to be around what he called negative emotions. His whole life, he struggled to be around people who are angry, sad, confused, disappointed. Anything that isn't happy, calm, bored, he's fine with those. Maybe not bored. But there's a very narrow range that he feels safe in, and anything outside of that range puts a lot of pressure on him. He feels it in his chest. He feels very tense, becomes very vigilant. Feels like whenever somebody's having those kind of feelings that there's some problem that needs to be solved and that it's somehow his fault. So you can imagine the combination of two such people, what living under the same roof would be like. So very early on in the relationship, he started trying to anticipate the kind of things that would upset her and prevent them from happening. So there's the kind of preventative moves that he was making where let's make sure she doesn't even become aware of any potential triggers. This might look like making sure there's always enough food in the house. It might look like keeping things clean all the time. It might be noticing that some hassle was coming up and solving it before she got home. It's kind of thing of like, don't let her know about anything bad happening. Could also mean hiding things like the weather's going to be ruining their picnic, so he might change the picnic rather than telling her about the weather. All these little things to just not give her any reason to be upset. And of course, if he missed it and she did get upset about something, he would essentially barrage her with fixing and advice. So he would just fall on her like an avalanche of so-called support to try and get her back to almost trying to like beat her into submission, as a metaphor, to convince her to be happy again, to convince her that everything's fine, to prove that the problem no longer exists or it's now solved, to kind of take away any excuse she might have for being upset. He would very much like down tools with whatever he's doing, just jump on her problems until they're all gone. And he got to a point where he actually started to kind of feel afraid of her. He'd actually feel a relief when she went back to her house, kind of sense of impending dread when she was coming over, kind of sense of being around her actually wasn't all that fun. And he actually was sometimes quite mean to her. He'd get upset with her when she wasn't fixed by his efforts. So if she got upset even though he'd done everything right, or if he offered solutions and she wouldn't take them or they didn't work for her, he would get mad at her that she's still upset, almost as if it's personal, like she's denying him or disrespecting him. In fact, he used the word disrespect quite often. If she was upset with his advice, he would say that he was being disrespected. And this very quickly led to a lot of resentment building up and a lot of avoidance. So rather than trying to fix her problems, he started to stray more into just staying away from her. The time between them, the emotional connection between them, whether the distance was sort of real or emotional, he started to drag it out. Basically, if he couldn't solve her problems, he just didn't want to be around her and he'd just avoid her or block her out. So he's blocking her out, he's complaining about her a lot, he's very irritable about her moods. And what does this do to her? Of course, it only increases her anxiety. She was already stressed out about all the fixing he's trying to do. Now she's anxious that he's going to leave her. She's becoming more reactive. She's becoming hypervigilant to his response to her reaction, to his response to her reaction, like that. And this gives you a hint as to why walking on eggshells might actually cause more problems than it solves. His overall approach was making her more reactive, more sensitive, and more emotional. Then the fact that he's trying to fix her while she's so emotional, that dynamic itself became a topic of argument. So they'd start fighting about the fighting that they're having about the thing. So that he would start getting on to her about how she's too sensitive. She would respond about how he's too controlling and fixing, and they would actually fight about their attempts to solve the problem. Again, there's a hint of another reason why walking on eggshells actually causes more conflict. The eggshells becomes a conflict. So he was in this, what he felt was a rock and a hard place situation where he's not allowed to upset her or let her get upset, but he also won't force her to take responsibility for her own problems and the vibe that she brings into the house. So he feels like there's really no options. And he started to say the classic nice guy line, which is, I can't win. So if you're the kind of person who feels like you're trying your best with your partner, walking on eggshells being one of those things, and you're starting to say things like, I just can't win, like nothing works, then today's episode is definitely for you. So let's step back a bit and have a look at what walking on eggshells actually means. Kind of definition of it. Well, it's a range of behaviors. All of them are avoidant of emotional discomfort. So there's the anticipating type behaviors. You get to learn someone, you know what upsets them or puts them into that range of emotion that you're not comfortable with. And you start trying to anticipate any of those potential triggers and stop them before they happen. If someone's particularly upset by bad news, you hide the bad news from them. If they tend to get offended when something happens, you try to stop that thing from happening. You start to try and predict what might set them off and cut it off at the source so they never have to experience it. And overall, there's just an attempt to reduce provocation, reduce triggers. We use the term walking on eggshells because it describes this person kind of tiptoeing over something that's very sensitive without trying to break it. And that's really what it feels like. That's why this phrase is so popular. It feels like there's a lot of sensitive stuff that could be stepped on. You have to tread very, very carefully to avoid breaking it. You start to make a little list in your head of all the things that they're provoked by. And whenever that might be coming up or you do those things, you try to reduce them. For example, if you find that they're provoked by slovenliness, you start finding that you're extra clean all the time and you get very anxious to make sure everything's put away properly and so on like that. And that's all in the prevention walking on eggshell stage. But walking on eggshells is also what happens when the eggshell cracks. So when they do get upset and you weren't able to prevent it, then we dive into fixing mode, which is kind of the back end of walking on eggshells, gluing the shells back together, you might say. So this is where we go and solve their problems for them, drop tools. If it's got nothing to do with us, we go and solve the problem anyway, and that's their problem. Let's say somebody was mean to them, we go confront that person, we make a phone call on their behalf. So they're stressed out, we go do the food shopping, even though they promised that they would. We kind of just start taking all the work off their plate. I've been guilty of doing this thousands of times, right? Especially if my wife's having a hard day, my first thought is, what can I take off her plate? As if that's what she needs, right? So this idea of like, how do I remove as many of their problems as possible? How do I get their to-do list down to zero? Because that will somehow make them easier to be around emotionally. And when that doesn't work, we actually go into a kind of denial. We try and convince them that they're not upset or should not be upset. We might be trying to like hyper exaggerate all the positive stuff. Things are fine because, and we try to like convince them that really they're doing quite well and that things are okay. Or we might try to reframe the thing. So they call something a problem, they complain about something, and we try to reframe it as a positive. We try to almost even guilt trip them into not believing that it's negative. Someone's complaining, we might say, well, at least it's not this bad like that other person, and try and sort of like give them some frame of reference. Almost, we'll tell ourselves we're being philosophical and mature. What we're really trying to do is kind of make them submit to the truth that they don't have a problem and therefore should not be upset, as if we can somehow kind of negotiate with their emotions to turn them off. And if all of that doesn't work, we generally prefer an avoidance technique. There's a movie called Don't Breathe, where these people break into a blind man's house, but he's also very good at hearing, so they have to like hold their breath whenever he's in the room. We get that kind of sense. I mean, some guys I've spoken to, myself included, actually reduce how loud their breathing is. I remember my first partner, first time I ever sort of slept with another person in the same bed. I tried to move as little and breathe as little as possible so that I couldn't disturb their sleep. So I was quite literally toning everything about myself down to create as little provocation as possible. But there might just be people where you just avoid certain topics of discussion, you avoid addressing things, you deny to yourself that you're upset with something so you don't have to bring it up. Lots of avoidance of confrontation, allowing boundaries to be crossed, pretending you agree when you actually disagree, just a kind of avoidance of anything that might stir emotions up. You might even like switch the channel as you're watching television because the topic in the show is something they're sensitive about. It's kind of like, just let's get away from all the bad stuff. That's generally what walking on eggshells looks like. And it creates a kind of hovering effect. That's what I like to think of it. We're kind of just hovering over in our blimp, looking down at everything, hyper vigilant all the time, trying to identify and prevent potential disasters. We do a lot of catastrophizing in our head. We take a small thing and we blow it up in our head as to how much of a disaster it will be for our partner or our boss or whoever we're worried about. And so we end up treating very small things as big problems because we've made them big problems up here. It might just look to the outsider like some minor thing, but to us, we're like, but this would lead to her feeling like that, which would lead to her making more mistakes, and then she feeling worse, and blah blah blah. And so I've got to deal with this right now. It's super high priority that the sink is clogged or whatever it is that we've extrapolated into our heads into a full blown breakdown. And some guys, I have to call it out here, some guys are with partners where this is not delusional. There's plenty of evidence that the person will have a full-blown meltdown over a tiny provocation. That they actually didn't walk on eggshells until they got into a relationship with this person, right? But for a vast majority, it's much more in the illusory place. There's a lot of guys who think disasters are going to happen. They don't even allow themselves to test it. They haven't actually found out. They just presumed. Whereas other guys have been scared by reactions they had in the past and they're using that as a reference. So we start sort of diving on warning signs. We've got our radar pinging all the time for potential threats. And as soon as we see one, we're fucking all over it, smothering it. Let's say your child's a bit tired in the morning and you know that that will lead to the two of them fighting later in the evenings. And you're like, oh my God, I've got to take care of this child before it becomes a problem in the afternoon. So like the slightest, like a 1 out of 10, you treat it like a 10 out of 10 because you're sure it will escalate. You also start to avoid opportunities that might be a trigger. A classic one is spending time with your friends. Most nice guys start to lose themselves socially over time because their partner maybe is a bit jealous or gets lonely or feels that things are unfair or just feels like they don't have a partner or something like that, whether that's real or imagined, that threat. So the guy will start saying no to things, even going on a great work trip that might make him lots of money or going to a new hobby, but it happens to be the time when the kids get put to bed and he's worried that she'll feel bad about having to do that. So you start saying no to stuff that's good for you because it just possibly might trigger something off. And over planning. You're so sure that everything's this potential trigger that there's just landmines everywhere that you do this great sort of recon before anything happens. Like if you guys have to go traveling together, you probably have checklists and fail safes and backups in case any tiny minor thing might go wrong. Some of you will use money. I've been guilty of doing that. Like as soon as my wife's like, "Oh, I forgot my charger," I'm like, "Buy another charger." Like, just solve it with buy things, solve it, just anything. Don't this kind of thing where you've always got contingencies planned for, like you're playing a game of chess against a fucking grandmaster or something. Then, of course, got with the emotional effects, what it's like emotionally to be in the walking on eggshells dynamic. I mean, fear is really what walking on eggshells is. Whether we admit it to ourselves or not, we might not have the sort of heart pumping, blood, sweat, and tears type fear, fight or flight response, but ultimately, any kind of preventative move is fear based. Any kind of a worrying and then trying to prevent that thing you're worried about, that's fear. Worry is fear. Anxiety is fear. Stress is fear. All right, so we're basically living in fear at this point. And exhaustion. Fear and exhaustion are probably the chief things. I mean, it's hard to stop someone from getting upset because life is quite upsetting. And there's always new things around the corner that you couldn't possibly predict, or old things that used to be fine and no longer are. And trying to keep up with all this double workload of running your own life and running theirs for them, of course you're going to be tired. You also get resentment. So on one hand, you're the one throwing yourself, like managing them, even if they asked for it. Most of the time they haven't asked for it. And it bothers you that you have to do this. It feels very unfair that they're putting you in this position, forcing you to have to walk on eggshells. You feel like you're being unfairly punished in some way and that they've done this to you. And the more you tell yourself this story, the more you believe it until it starts to build up to a story of them essentially being abusive towards you, or at least being a very unreasonable person or just a very chaotic and dysfunctional person. And like you're the rock, right? So you're this great guy doing everything right. And yet it's just constant tension and drama. And just feels like you've kind of been dealt a shitty hand. Chronic anxiety, of course. I mean, if you're worrying all the time, suddenly worrying becomes your state because you don't know what the next threat's going to be. You have to worry all the time as just a general hypervigilant state. So you're probably going to end up with sleeplessness. You might even have a problem with your bowels. You'll probably put on weight. There'll be all these symptoms that come with just having to be on top of everything all the time and never getting a chance to rest. We stress and frustration. It's like banging your head against a wall. Like every time you solve a problem, another one pops up. It's that story about the Hydra, like the snake, you cut its head off and two more heads appear. Seems like every mood you solve for your partner, she has two new moods. Every problem you solve creates two more problems, or two new ones come up, or she finds new problems somehow, like she's going looking for them. And it starts to just be very frustrating that your approach isn't working. That you're putting in all this effort and the return on investment is pitiful. Like, at best, you can maybe save her from one of her moods, but there'll just be another move again tomorrow. At best, you can save her from one of her moods, but there'll just be a new mood tomorrow and the day after that. It's like trying to empty the ocean with a bucket. It's like a lot of effort for zero results. And again, this contributes to the resentment. You think somehow she's holding back, she's not pulling her weight. You've done your side of things, she's not doing hers. She's making it hard for you, etc. There's probably a lot of disappointment on both sides. We'll talk about that in a minute, but on your side too. Like you've given her the opportunity to be this calm, happy person all the time. She's not taking that opportunity. You're very attached to the hope that one day all of this drama will go away and your approach will actually work as well as have a good relationship. Neither you're in a relationship where the tension happens no matter what you do, or you have kind of solved the tension, but it's actually killed everything else. Kind of like a chemotherapy of the relationship. There's no love left, connection, intimacy, fun, friendship. That's been killed alongside the drama. And you've always yearned for like a great relationship, and now it just feels like every time you try, it doesn't work out. It's very disappointing. Your expectations aren't being met, which of course leads to a different type of yearning, and that's the yearning to escape. So quite often you'll start to have fantasies. Now, maybe the fantasy is just about a better relationship, whatever that might be. But maybe it's fantasy about being alone, or fantasy about being with someone else, or fantasy about her being different to who she really is, kind of yearning for something that doesn't exist, or yearning for something different. And that can also lead to dread, just an overall sense of being trapped in a prison, being unable to be released, especially if you've got children together. You might think, oh my God, it's just going to be this forever. It's just going to get worse. And there's no way out. Then you might even yearn for much more dramatic things, running away, committing suicide, even. It can get really dark. And you notice the relationship changes over time. The petty disputes go up. Probably got along pretty well in the first few months of your relationship, though some of you have actually had drama from day one and didn't sort of pick up on that red flag. You'll probably just notice that it seems like she's getting more sensitive over time. That her expectations of what you'll provide for her are going up and becoming impossible to meet and unreasonable and unfair. So much more than where you guys were at the start. Probably sex and intimacy have gone down, which is a pretty classic reaction to the drop in tension in a relationship. But even just the attraction's dying off. It's very hard for her to be attracted to someone who's scared of her. It's very hard for you to be attracted to someone you're scared of. That dynamic's really not going to work out for attraction. Those expectations that are coming from her that are too hard to meet, they're also coming from yourself. You're demanding higher and higher performance from yourself around managing her, not cracking any eggshells, holding yourself to these really impossibly high standards. And over time, those standards start to become suffocating. At the start, you could manage this. You wouldn't even listen to a podcast like this because it was working, in your opinion. But there's a certain tipping point where this is really just going downhill and it feels like you can't control the thing. So they start to seem more sensitive. They're more easily disappointed, more easily offended. Their sort of standards have gone up to a point that you feel is very unreasonable. And you just feel that kind of world closing in. Prison, the wall's getting tighter, you've lost your friends, your hobbies, your life's become all about trying to prevent someone else from having emotions. It's kind of codependence there. You feel trapped by their need for you. Like you're in a situation where it seems like they would fall apart without you, that somehow the rest of their life, who knows how they survive, but now they really do need you, so you're trapped by that. The idea that maybe you've deliberately fostered this arrangement might not readily occur to you, but we'll get to that. And of course, in the long run, the worst outcomes of walking on eggshells, cheating and breakups, violence or massive outbursts from you as all that resentment bubbles over and you lash out, can get really dark. All because you're trying to be a good guy and trying not to upset it. Looks like such a good idea at the start. Looked like a really noble thing. Something you were probably proud of. You might have even bragged about it. Hey, we never fight, right? Well, maybe it wasn't as good as it appeared to be. So let's now talk about the why behind this. If this thing is indeed backfiring and is indeed an unhealthy way to have a relationship, then why would we do it? Where did we get this idea from? Why do we believe it's to be a good idea if it so clearly creates bad results? Well, let's figure it out. Let's start with childhood, where most shit starts, right? So if some of you, this wouldn't have happened until you got into this specific relationship. Others, you know that this walking on eggshell shit is beyond this one relationship. It's a strategy you've been employing in many situations with a vast range of people over a long period of time. If that's the case, then it's probably a childhood thing, and usually it starts with an unpredictable home life. Unpredictable is the key word here. Now, walking on eggshells, it's another phrase you might say is walking in a minefield. You don't know where the damage is going to happen. You don't know where the threat is. So you tiptoe because the threat could be from anywhere. You don't get that in a predictable household. Now, in a predictable household, there might be certain dangers and threats, but they only happen under very specific circumstances. So as long as those circumstances are happening, you're safe. So you might only walk on eggshells in those circumstances, or you might just prevent them from happening. But generally, the people who tiptoe around, it's because they came from an environment where there just wasn't a clear set of rules to follow. The rules seemed to change all the time. What caused harm and caused punishment was never consistent. And so you had to develop a radar for all the early warning signs because they may come at any time in any context, and there was no rhyme or reason to them. So you either had real or imagined dangers. You could have just been somebody who's really sensitive and you got upset by banter and called it bullying, so on, or you could be someone who is in a genuinely threatening environment, including all the way up to abuse and violence. But you would have figured out at some point quite early on that those who don't provoke get the least amount of harm caused to them. There's a kind of what we call walking on eggshells. There's a safest way to act out of all the available ways. There's a way that sets off the least amount of alarms, causes the least amount of reactions, negatively speaking, has the least amount of downside, and that if you can just stay on top of this, you'll have the least amount of damage. And doing any other method causes much more damage. So you started to just unconsciously form a pattern or a habit of being that got the best results. Now, if you've got a strict parent, for example, then there's probably lots of ways you could break the rules. There are probably new rules every day. But you learned if you were just very, very good all the time and barely noticed and didn't make a sound, you broke the least amount of rules and had the least amount of punishment. So you just tried to be good all the time, tried to figure out what that meant. What's the safe, narrow range of behaviors I can stay within that almost never get punished, right? Bullying in childhood, from outside the family as well as inside, can also be a leading factor where you develop a belief that only the noticed get shot, right? So if I don't put my head above the trench, I won't get shot at. And so walking on eggshells is a kind of way of staying out of people's radars. If I don't get noticed, I don't get punished. It's a very simplistic kind of solution here. So if you're the odd kid at school or whatever and you got bullied, you might realize, well, to get bullied, the bully has to even realize I'm there in the first place. If the bully can't see me or can't find me, there's no bullying. There's a very simple solution there. While all the other kids are playing outside, I go to the chess room with the other kids who are bullied or whatever. If I can just stay off the radar, nothing bad happens to me. So walking on eggshells becomes this kind of general avoidance methodology of like, if I don't get noticed, nothing bad happens. If I don't bring up the conversation, there's no argument. If I don't do the thing that people don't like, there's no upsetting them. I just won't get noticed, problem fucking solved, right? And for a child, that is a very simple and effective solution to painful situations and uncomfortable emotions. The idea that later on in adulthood, this might completely fuck up your relationships and kill your career opportunities and make you loathe yourself, give you no chance of a good life, that doesn't occur to you when you're a kid. You're just trying to get by day. And days are long when you're a kid. You'll take any way to reduce the amount of pain, right? The problem is when you're over the age of 20 and still applying this methodology. You could also, like me, be a sensitive kid. Now, I wouldn't say necessarily that I was sensitive emotionally. That might have been the case when I was younger. It's not so much the case now. But I was actually quite sensitive physically. I feel pain more. I feel temperature more. I'm just more easily bothered by sounds, by bright lights, all these kinds of things. Some bit of autism I've got maybe. And so there's just an overall lower tolerance for any kind of hassle, emotional, like people shouting. I just don't like the sound, let alone the fact that it's aggressive, which I also don't like. So you might develop walking on eggshells just to provoke the least amount of stimulation. It might be that you just don't want lots of conversation. You don't want lots of emotion around you. You don't want noise. You don't want commotion. So you might develop a strategy that just kind of reduces the amount of stimulation in your life. It's usually combined with also some shame and fear around certain emotions, being disliked, and so on. There's also the underlying belief that there's a grand solution, what Robert Glover calls a smooth, problem-free life. The reason we try to stamp out every ember before it turns into a fire, and we try to prevent every possible upset before it arises, is because we think that this is actually fucking possible. We actually think that if we got everything tuned right, our partner would never be upset again. Now, when we say it out loud, we know it sounds ridiculous. Anybody I've ever worked with, all of my clients, when I say, you think that you could get to a point where your partner's never upset, they're like, oh, no, of course not. Not that fucking stupid. And yet they do believe that. They are trying to get that. Why else would they strive so hard to stamp out every possible provocation? It's because they've seen what they think is success in the past. They've seen examples where they did fix someone's feelings. They did cheer up someone who was down. They calmed down someone who was angry. You know, take someone who was really pessimistic and make them optimistic. They've done that before and they think, well, if I can do it sometimes, surely all the time is just dialing up whatever I was doing there. Just cut and paste whatever that strategy was, apply it all the time, and people will always be cheerful, always be calm, always be whatever. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but if you look at your behavior, you're behaving as if you're a person who believes that there is a way to keep everyone calm all the time. You're looking for a kind of final solution. And that's one of the reasons you're so frustrated and exhausted all the time. It's like you've almost got the formula, and then something shows you that you missed something. Like, oh, God, I almost had them all. Like you're trying to catch every fish in the ocean in your net, and one slips out. You're like, oh, so close. As if emotions were something that you could control. This often comes from a childhood shame where you think them being upset is personal to you, that you are somehow the cause or you're responsible for it, that you're not good enough as a partner if they are upset, that there's something wrong with you if people around you have emotions that you're not comfortable with. And so you automatically frame a large range of emotions as problems that must be solved by you, right? This is your fault. This is your mess. You must clean it up. So the idea that emotions aren't problems and they're nothing to do with you, that doesn't exist in your universe, that kind of framework. For you, it's like all emotions are all mine to deal with. Mine, theirs, anybody around me, they must feel this narrow band of comfortable emotions at all time, or otherwise I am an abject failure, right? And that if they're upset, that is bad and it must be stopped. And I must be the one to stop it because I can't get upset either. Otherwise, I've failed myself, and so on. This extends to a belief that good relationships have little to no conflict. This idea that if you were a great person and managed everyone's emotions correctly, the end result would be a relationship that has absolutely no conflict. It's just love and fun and good fucking times all the time, just like it appears everyone else is enjoying on Facebook and so on, right? You've got this idea this is possible. It's what a good couple looks like. Anybody who fights or quarrels or has disagreements in any way is failing as a couple. I actually see myself as superior to them because we have less drama than they do, these kinds of stories. And so basically, if you had a day where somehow you managed to keep your partner happy all day, you'd consider that day to be a whopping success. And a day where they're miserable all day would be a failure. The trouble is, it's not entirely wrong. Good relationships do have less conflict than other relationships, but that doesn't mean they don't have confrontation or disagreement or people being assertive and setting boundaries with each other. Conflict and confrontation or disagreement are not the same thing. But in your mind, they are. Any kind of negative feelings is a failure. One of the driving beliefs is also this idea that being honest would be worse. So there would be some explosion if you were to crunch these eggshells, that the resulting drama would be so chaotic, so devastating, that whatever damage being a people pleaser walking on eggshells is doing, it's nothing compared to the other way. And so it's a kind of like cost and benefits analysis you do in your head. Like, if I told her what I really think, she'd be so fucking upset, she'd die. So it's better off that I lie to her. That's a lesser crime, a lesser evil. One way to frame it is you're saying this short-term explosion is worse than a lifetime of being disrespected and hating myself and having a bad connection with my partner. Sounds kind of ridiculous when you put it that way, but that is how you behave. You avoid the short-term explosion and you accept the long-term shittiness. As I mentioned before, it's not your fault that you believe all this stuff because the way the brain is wired, you've seen evidence that you're right. You've seen short-term loops where you have fixed them, where you have prevented them from being upset. And that has made you feel better and seem like the relationship's doing better. And because you've been focused on the short term, you haven't been able to see the long term. And the brain is very wired for short-term thinking in this way. So you're like, okay, she's really sad. That makes me feel guilty and ashamed because my partner's sad. That means I'm a failure as a man. I go make a joke. She laughs. She's happy. We're happy together, having a good time. This is a good relationship because we're both feeling happy. Those are the rules. Yay, I'm good at this. And that's happened hundreds, thousands. I mean, you wouldn't be doing the strategy if it hadn't worked heaps of times, right? It worked. It stopped the bullies from picking on you because you were the funny kid or they just didn't notice you. It worked on your parents, kept them calm when they were usually so chaotic. It made you the funny guy in your group so people liked you. A couple of your early girlfriends said things like, oh, it's so easy to be around you. I wish every guy was like you. You started getting all this feedback that says, like, I am on track. This strategy is fucking A plus. Why is my relationship not working? I'm doing everything right. So it's not your fault that you can't see that even if they're being grateful and even if they did experience happiness as a direct result, that doesn't mean you're doing something that's healthy. That doesn't mean that this is good. Compare it to eating ice cream. The feelings, sensations of eating ice cream are amazing. You could say, like, I am doing well with eating. I must be. Look how good I feel, right? But if you ate nothing but ice cream and gave it 10 years, what kind of situation are you going to be in then? Well, walking on eggshells is the relationship equivalent of eating ice cream. It might give you a little hit now and then. Doing it occasionally is not bad, but doing it all the fucking time, you're going to get obese. Divorce obese. I don't know. Something like that, right? So those short-term rewards, that feedback loop of reinforcement, kind of slows down the damage. So you don't see that the overall thing is eroding and rotting because the day by day feels actually like a lot of little wins, right? It's hard to feel like you're losing if you're winning all the time. And one of the main problems, one of the main reasons that people continue doing things this way is because of that disconnect. They'll notice that there's problems in the relationship, but they don't connect it with walking on eggshells. In fact, they think this is the solution to those problems because this is your one tool that you apply to every fucking job. So as they disconnect from you, as the intimacy goes down the toilet, as they start to nitpick and complain all the time, as you start to grow distant, you start to think, well, I'm just not walking on eggshells carefully enough. I'm still upsetting them. I need to dial the strategy up, not realizing that you're just increasing the dosage of poison. And this is, one of the great tragedies of the human condition, the way we see the world, the way our psyche functions, is we cannot see that a short-term win causes long-term losses. We cannot see that trade-off. And even when it's right in front of us, We don't connect the two together. And we often do the exact opposite. We try to solve the thing with the cause of the problem. Because this is happening, we start to reinforce it with this blame and resentment story. So the walking on eggshells starts to become a reason in and of itself, because we start to tell ourselves a story like, I'm doing everything right, she's still getting upset, she's the problem, right? It might happen right away. It might take a while. You resist this kind of guilt that comes with blaming her and thinking of her as a bad person. Some of you never get to the blame stage. You always think that you're the sole cause of every problem. There's almost an ego to it. You're like, it's not allowed to be her fault at all. A lot of you start to think like, look, she's too sensitive. She's unreasonable. Her standards are too high. She doesn't appreciate what I'm doing for her. She's punishing me with her emotions. Right? Like her being sad is a deliberate, malicious thing to make my day worse, punish me for my failures. You start to build up this picture of her being the bad guy in this situation. She's the antagonist. This is actually one of the main reasons that nice guys end up cheating. Cheating seems like such a weird behavior for a nice guy, but it's because he built up a story over years that he's with someone who's very mean and cruel and unreasonable and unappreciative, and she's basically driving him into the arms of another loving woman. And while this blame causes even more walking on eggshells, well, the devastating thing it does is remove your ability to lead and to take responsibility for this problem. If you think she's the cause and it's her fault, it doesn't occur to you that you're going to have to be the one to solve it, right? You've done your bit, right? You're fucking A plus over here. She's the problem. It's her turn. The idea that this is actually something you need to take responsibility for. You need to initiate the change. It just doesn't occur to you if you're in the blaming victim headspace. And here's the ouchiest fucking reason for this. You like it. You like being the fixer. You love codependence. You might not admit this to yourself, but you actually have seen times where there was an opportunity for you to stop doing this, where she stepped up, solved her own problems, where you realize that her being upset, you don't actually have to do anything about it. She's fine without you intervening, and you did it anyway, right? You're more attached to being the fixer, the one who takes care of, it's fucking Munchausen by proxy shit, than you are of actually having an enjoyable relationship. This is the hardest thing for us to accept. You're doing this because deep down you want to. That you've never done anything you didn't choose to do. That you could have walked away from this relationship or changed your behavior or challenged the dynamic any time you liked, but you didn't. You chose something else instead. You chose to keep doing it this way. Now, partly that's because you thought it was the right way. Partly it's because we just repeat what we consistently do. But some part of you likes this dynamic, likes the power, likes to feel like you're in control of the other person, and it makes you feel safe. If they're dependent on you, they're less likely to leave. Most nice guys have a belief that the only value they bring is the problem solving, that they as a person is not a valuable enough reason to stay in a relationship, that the person's not really just with you because you're with you because of what you provide. And if what you provide is fixing their emotions by walking on eggshells, you're worried that you'd actually lose them if you stop providing that thing. So you're actually quite attached to things staying this way. Otherwise, you would have changed it a long time ago. By the way, if this is sounding like you and you want some more help with it, get in touch, dan@brojo.org, where you can comment the word eggshells below wherever this post is. I'll send you a little quiz survey about your relationship. And based on your answers, I'll actually give you a customized personal response as to what you can do next to make your relationship healthier and build your confidence and self-worth at the same time. So we've looked at what walking on eggshells is and why it happens and why it doesn't work. Let's have a look at the solution. How can we deal with this in a way that actually gives you a great relationship, you can enjoy your life, and you like who you are, right? Confidence and connection. First and foremost, you must accept responsibility. This is not her fault. It's not your fault either. It's nobody's fault, but it is your job to fix it. Absolutely your job. If you can't accept that, you can't do anything about this. It's as simple as that. She's not going to drag you kicking and screaming into a healthy, interdependent relationship. You aren't actually doing your 50% yet. You haven't done your job yet. You haven't even started. So, if nothing else, you got to remember you chose this relationship. You're not forced to stay in it. Don't use your kids as an excuse. You could leave. You choose to do this every single fucking day. So take responsibility for that choice. You're not being forced into this situation, right? Even if she threatens to commit suicide if you leave her, that's still not force. You could just call the cops and move on with your life. No, you choose to be here, which means if you want the situation to improve and you choose to be here, it's your job to improve it. If you cannot accept that, then suffer. But suffer knowing that you chose to keep suffering, because you don't have to. I'm not saying you should leave the relationship, though some of you listening to this have either done too much damage or you're with someone who's too dysfunctional to have a good relationship with. But before ending it, if you really want to make sure that you've exhausted all options, let's at least try taking responsibility first and see what happens. Secondly, you have to accept that walking on eggshells is a cause, not a solution. That the strategy you've been using your entire life is the direct cause of your problems. It just doesn't happen in real time. It looks like a win in real life is a loss in the long term. So you have to accept that at least half the drama or half the problems in your relationship, at the very least, are caused by you trying to prevent them. Okay, this thing is backfiring on you, that it might seem illogical or counterintuitive, but your attempt to solve the problem causes it. So we've got to stop doing that attempt. That method does not work. Whatever other method you try after this, stop doing the one you're doing, because if you're listening to this or watching this far into it, then shit's not working for you. All right, you're not doing well. You're going to have to commit to being brave. Right? We talked about this being a fear-based problem. You're going to have to face your fears, which means you're going to have to get emotionally uncomfortable on purpose and not stop that from happening, not prevent it, and not solve it. You're going to have to initiate conversations and do certain behaviors that make you full of guilt, shame, fear, and keep doing them, even though those feelings are happening. You're going to have to choose to embrace those feelings, as horrible as they might seem. And, I have empathy for you, but I've been through that. I've pushed myself through all those. I still do whenever I relapse. So I don't have pity for you. I know you can do it. I know you're not as weak as you think you are. So I'm not going to say, yeah, it's too hard to do. It's not, but it is hard. It is extremely uncomfortable. There are going to be moments where you're deep into the thick of an argument with your partner and it doesn't look like it's going to get solved. And you're not allowed to use your old-fashioned resources because you're too far in now. And you're just going to have to wing it through that horrible experience. Yeah, that's going to happen. A lot of the solutions that lie in front of you are the things you've been avoiding this whole time. Like, if nothing else, just doing the opposite of what you've been doing is probably healthier. So you can imagine what kind of extra drama that might cause as short-term spikes of discomfort as opposed to a long-term drag of misery. And I won't lie, like, for some of you, your relationship will not survive a change. That it is based on codependence. That this process might end it. But I'll tell you right now, if you being more honest and self-respecting and trying to establish a healthy connection with your partner is the thing that ends the relationship, did you ever really have one? Is that something you really want to maintain? If you have to keep eating poison to keep something alive, is that thing really worth keeping alive? Maybe. Maybe being alone is worse than that. I don't think so. You'll have to decide for yourself. So there's two main solutions here that you have to apply simultaneously. One is you have to stop treating her emotions like they're problems to be solved, right? You must allow her or your boss or your friend or your parent, whoever this is really applying to be upset. So long as nothing is physically attacking them being upset is not actually harmful. They can be upset all day and there'll be no injuries whatsoever, no scars. to prove that it ever happened. That if she says like, "Oh my God, that's so offensive," you can just let her be offended, right? For hours, if need be. It never lasts that long, but you can. If she's angry, you don't actually have to calm her down. I mean, if she starts throwing plates, then you walk out on her. But so long as nobody's getting physically harmed and no serious abuse is taking place, she's not screaming insults at your son or something like that, there's nothing you need to do. Just let them be upset. You'd be amazed. It looks like such a threat. Somebody's angry or disappointed. It feels like that needs a fix. Let them be disappointed. I mean, disappointment is a sensation of processing that you were wrong to have those expectations. Right? That's all it is. There's no such thing as objective disappointment. Right? Life is what it is. People do what they do. If you're disappointed with that, then you were expecting the wrong thing. You were incorrect. So you don't need to fix someone's disappointment. In fact, their disappointment is evidence that they're doing something wrong, that their view of life is incorrect, that they don't know how to measure reality. So you need to let them fucking get some training in. If you go and fix it for them, you actually reinforce that expectation, that unreasonable expectation. You're setting them up for failure. If they're sad, let them be sad. Maybe they're grieving something. Maybe they're processing loss. Let them fucking process it. Don't get in the way of that. If they're angry, let them be angry. Maybe there's something that they need to set a boundary about, but they never get angry enough to fucking move. Well, let them be angry and maybe they'll move. Maybe they'll find some courage. But whenever they have an emotion that you're uncomfortable about, even if they're pointing the finger at you and saying, you did something wrong and you've upset me and you're the problem, just stop and go, wait, is there any actual harm being done besides the discomfort I have with this emotion? If the answer is no, then the requirement for you to intervene is zero. Let it happen. Harder than it looks. Actually, it's about as hard as it looks. The second thing is you have to prioritize honesty over harmony. Okay, you saying the thing you know is true, doing the thing you know is right for you, being honest is never going to be aligned with a perfectly harmonious relationship. There will always be disagreements. There will always be disharmony in a relationship if both people are being honest. I don't care how well aligned they are. I don't care how close their preferences are. There's going to be something that's different. If you guys are getting along all the time, one of you's being dishonest at least, probably both of you. So when you get to that crossroads where it's a choice between keeping them happy or being honest, instead of doing that thing where you lie to keep them happy, be honest instead. So those are the two main solutions here. Let them have their feelings and be honest instead of trying to keep them calm and avoid rocking the boat. Those two will take you out of this hole. Those two are the prevention of real conflict, though they cause short-term discomfort. So they look like losses, but they're actually wins. Keep in mind, the thing you thought looked like a win was actually a loss. So maybe what I'm saying is not so crazy. The few ways that this looks like in real life. One is what I call throwing in the ice water. Quite often, the time to be honest is really inappropriate. You'll have something pop into your mind that's very honest, something needs to be said, and it just would ruin a great moment. That's going to happen a lot. Honesty is a bitch like that. It never waits for things to be like, wow, it's already shit, might as well do it now. Fact is, when it is shit, you're even less inclined to do it because you don't want to make it worse. But the horrible truth is, honesty is going to occur at times where you had a good vibe going, things were harmonious, you're having a good day, you're getting along well, and then you notice something and you're like, this is going to kill the moment. Kill the moment. Throw that bucket of ice water all over your nice little situation. Okay, you've got to be willing to let go of those good times to have even better times in the future. Okay, because if you let that thing hang, there'll never be a time that it comes out. Now you're just back to walking on eggshells again, which makes you loathe yourself, makes them disrespect you. Got to remember, it's not a win that they're happy right here in the moment. Doesn't mean anything good necessarily. Learn the difference between supporting and fixing. Fixing is I do it for you. Supporting is I encourage you to do it for yourself. That's the simplest way I can define the difference here. So you got to ask, if they are struggling with something, are you encouraging them to deal with it, or are you dealing with it, right? You are not their fucking coach. You're not their therapist. You're not their handyman. Sure, you guys will help each other out with various tasks, but that's different. You know that that's different. It feels different. You take turns cooking the dinner. That doesn't feel like fixing. When they say my boss is an asshole, and you're like, right, give me his number, I'll call him. That's not your fucking job. It's not your boss. Her setting her boundaries, not your job. So you say, well, what do you think you should say to your boss? And I don't mean give her the advice, because that's fixing. Now you're just solving her problem through her. You're using her like a body, but it's really your mind. No, it should be her mind, her solutions. When she says, oh, I'm going to do this, and you go, that's a stupid idea. You go, no, okay, well, try that then, right? Let her make mistakes. Let her get it wrong. How else is she going to learn? How did you learn? And are your solutions really that fucking good? Really? Are you so sure of that? Like, you're so sure that you doing it is really superior to other people learning to do it for themselves? Are you that arrogant? Are you that short-sighted? How well is your life going really? Are you in the top 10 of everything, crushing it? A clear model for how to live? Or do you just think you are? Because if you're a nice guy people pleaser in a relationship where you walk on eggshells, maybe you don't have it all sorted, mate. Maybe you don't have all the fucking answers. Maybe you shouldn't be giving advice. Hey, you got to identify the difference between them being upset and you doing something wrong. They're not one and the same things. And this is where it's going to get really nuanced. You got to know what your core values are and how to live by them. But they're upset, and you've got to ask yourself, is this actually evidence that I have lacked integrity and done something harmful that's my job to fix? Or did they just not get their preferred result? And maybe I did the right thing, or I'm not involved, or I'm neutral in this case. And so no behavior change is actually required here. Don't think they're upset, must change behavior as this knee-jerk reaction. They're like, okay, they are upset. Maybe I can just understand why they're upset. Like, oh, you didn't get your way. Yeah, that's upsetting. I get upset when I don't get my way too. Doesn't mean anybody did anything wrong. I saw this clip from The Office, the American version. This two guys are walking away from something that didn't go well. One of the guys like, oh, I just don't understand what we did wrong, blah, blah, blah. The other guy's like, dude, sometimes you just lose. And that's the thing you got to understand. Like, sometimes you can do everything right, she'll still get upset. It might not even be about you. In fact, it's never really about you. It's about a whole childhood and upbringing and everything led to this moment. There's nothing you can fix. You'd have to go back and redo her entire life for her to not get upset in this moment, right? Change all her belief systems. So maybe being upset is not a bad thing anyway. Leave it alone. But if you're like, oh, I did something wrong there by my standards, it's got nothing to do with her reaction. In fact, I'd feel I did something wrong even if she was happy. Well, then you go and change it, but not because she got upset, but because you felt that it didn't meet your standards. The way I put it is crunch the eggshells. All those things that you tiptoe around and avoid and prevent, let them happen or make them happen. It can be an almost transition period where you go around like deliberately provoking and triggering. And I don't mean being mean or cruel, but finally, honestly doing those things that you've always wanted to do and saying those things you've always wanted to say and just kind of letting all hell break loose. That's what it'll feel like you're doing. Feel like you're just going to let the whole world collapse. You know, like you play your music in the car instead of always playing hers and just let her react to that music, right? Just do those things that you just, there might be a list that you have to make of 100 things you do every day to prevent drama. And just go, what would it look like to actually bring about those things? To either let them happen as a natural side effect of me living well, or to actually go and make them happen because I've been missing opportunities and denying myself. You know, let's say she's someone who gets really jealous when you go out with your friends. Go out with your friends. No negotiation, nothing. Just say, I'm going out with my friends Wednesday. Let her go raw and just go, all right, fine, do the raw thing. Doesn't make a difference. See you when I get home. You just go out and do it and just let it all fucking go to shit. That's what it will feel like you're doing. Now, if you're in an abusive relationship, you'll constantly get bad reactions to this. And after a while, you'll realize like you living an honest way by your values always gets a bad reaction from them. In that case, you're in a bad relationship. But there might just be a settling in period, a couple of weeks or months where they're like, oh, this guy's fucking fluttering his wings a bit. She's used to a certain codependent dynamic. She unconsciously tries to bring that back. You don't allow it to come back. She adjusts to the new you. She prefers it. Life gets really good. That is possible. And in my experience coaching guys, it's somewhere in the realm of like 60-40 positive. So like maybe 60% of the guys who come to me in this situation, this approach has repaired their relationship and taken it to this new great place that they didn't think was possible because the woman actually wanted him to be a confident guy and didn't want to be codependent herself. And then about 40% of the time, once the guy's got his shit sorted, we see that the woman is actually a problem. That in his weaker moments, he chose a very unhealthy person and dysfunctional person to be with, and they've got no interest in improving themselves. And there's just no way forward from that. I mean, a lot of you will be with abusive partners because you invited it. The kind of person who walks on eggshells is very attracted to an abusive person who likes to be controlling. And some of you think you were the controlling person, you think they're a narcissist, but really it's you allowing yourself to be moved by their emotions. They're not trying to control you at all. You're just very sensitive to emotion and you can't let it happen. If you were to let it happen, you realize they're not telling you to do shit. They're not trying to force anything from you. They aren't manipulating you. They're just feeling things because they're a fucking human being who feels things. You're allowed to feel things. Did you know that? Yeah, it's true. I looked it up. So be loud, go out with your friends, disagree, refuse to rush. Let little bad things happen that aren't your responsibility. Just crunch those eggshells and just tolerate the response that happens. Don't try to fix, just let it happen. So long as no one gets physically hurt, you don't actually have to do anything. And like I said, you got to expect a transition period. You know, you've taken away her crutches, she might have to learn to walk again. It might change the way she feels about you. There might be a bit of fluctuation up and down. It's really important if you're going to make a big dramatic change that you talk to her about it, let her know it's coming, but don't make promises. You've probably done that before as part of your walking on eggshells. Just say, here's something I intend to attempt. I don't know how well it's going to go, but the effect might be noticeable. So I want you to be prepared. I'm doing this for us, not against us, but I don't think you're going to react well to it at first. You know, something like that. Of course, if you want help overcoming the fears that are going to come up and the communication disabilities that you're going to have to overcome, you can get in touch, dan@brojo.org. I've walked a lot of guys through this path and it can be done by almost anyone. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I'll see you guys next time.